The old man lived far away from towns, in a wide, empty land where the sky touched the earth. His ranch was quiet, only the sound of wind passing through broken fences and the cries of birds in the distance. Years ago, he had been a soldier, strong and proud, but now he was just a retired man with tired eyes. He chose to live alone because he was done with wars, done with people, done with noise. Each day was the same. He woke up before sunrise, fed the few animals left in his care, fixed the old wooden fences, and sat on the porch with his pipe, staring at the endless fields. At night, the ranch became even more silent. The stars spread across the sky like scattered diamonds, and the moonlight painted the land in silver. Sometimes he remembered his comrades, the ones who never came back from battles. Sometimes he thought about his wife, long gone, buried under the soil behind the ranch, where a small cross marked her grave. Loneliness was his only companion, but he had accepted it as his fate. Still, deep inside, he knew something was missing, something beyond the fences and beyond the memories he carried like heavy stones on his back. One evening, while repairing the roof of his barn, he stopped and looked toward the horizon. The air felt strange, heavy, as if carrying whispers he could not understand. He told himself it was only the wind, but the feeling stayed in his chest. His animals were restless too. The horses kicked inside the stable, and the old dog barked at the empty fields. He calmed them down, but even he could not shake the sense that something was coming, something he had not expected in all his years of solitude. His routine carried on. Days turned into weeks. He grew vegetables in the small garden, chopped wood for the cold nights, and listened to the creaking of the house built long before he was born. The ranch was old, but it stood strong, much like him. Yet he felt more tired with each passing day, his back aching more, his steps slower. Sometimes he spoke to himself just to hear a voice. The silence had become too deep, too endless, and he feared one day he might vanish inside it without anyone noticing. But nature had its own ways of breaking silence. A storm began to gather one night. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, swallowing the stars. The wind howled louder than before, and rain struck the windows of his ranch with angry hands. He sat by the fireplace, the only light flickering in the wooden house, listening to the storm's roar. Lightning flashed, showing shadows of trees bending under the wind. Thunder cracked so close that the ground shook under his boots. It was the kind of storm that made even a soldier's heart uneasy. He leaned back in his chair, whispering to himself, just another storm, nothing more. But the storm carried something else with it, an echo, faint yet real. In the middle of thunder and rain, he thought he heard something different, a sound that did not belong to the storm. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was his imagination. But then it came again. A knock. He froze. For years, no one had knocked on his door. No neighbors, no travelers, no strangers. The ranch was too far, too forgotten. Who could be outside in a storm like this? The knocking grew louder, desperate, almost shaking the wooden door. His heart pounded as if he was back in a battlefield, waiting for the enemy to charge. He slowly reached for the old rifle that rested against the wall, dust covering its metal, but still working. The knocking did not stop. It turned into pounding, a rhythm filled with fear. Whoever was outside was not patient. Whoever was outside was not safe under the storm. He stood, his old bones cracking, and stepped toward the door. The sound of rain and thunder mixed with the pounding, and he could almost hear voices, though unclear. He thought he heard crying, but he was not sure. His dog growled low, standing by his side. The old man placed a hand on the animal's head, steadying it, though his own hands were not steady. He wondered if this was trouble coming to his door. Bandits? Soldiers from another war? Or maybe something worse? Something not human at all? He reached the door slowly. His breath was heavy, his chest tight. The pounding stopped for a second, replaced by silence. Then a softer knock came, like pleading. He could almost imagine a weak voice whispering through the wood, "Please." His finger brushed the cold handle. For years, his ranch had been his shield against the world. For years, no one had crossed its boundaries. Now, in the middle of a storm, someone or something stood outside begging to come in. His mind raced with questions. Should he open it? Should he keep the door locked? Was this the reason he had felt the strange air for days? The thunder boomed again, shaking the ground, and he made his choice. He pulled the door open. The storm wind burst inside, cold rain spraying across the floor. In the doorway stood shadows, many of them, drenched and trembling. Their eyes shone in the lightning, not human eyes, but alien, glowing with fear and desperation. 11 figures, cloaked and thin, looked at him as if he was their only hope. They were widows, though he did not know it yet. They stood before him, broken and begging for shelter. The lonely ranch was no longer lonely. His quiet life had ended with a single knock. The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm that was about to enter his life. The old man stood in the doorway, his rifle still in his hand, the storm raging behind the figures outside. Rain poured down their faces, and their cloaks were heavy with water. Lightning flashed, and in that brief light, he saw their faces clearly for the first time. They were not human. Their skin carried strange colors, pale silver, greenish hues, and their eyes glowed faintly like embers. He counted quickly. There were 11 of them, all women. Their faces were thin, tired, and filled with fear. They looked weak, but their eyes told a story of suffering and survival. One of them stepped forward, shivering as the cold wind pushed at her back. Her voice was shaky but clear. "Please, help us. We have nowhere else to go." The words were broken, her accent strange, but the meaning was easy to understand. The others lowered their heads, clutching each other for warmth. Some of them were holding small bags, nothing more than scraps of belongings. They looked like wanderers who had traveled far and lost everything on the way. The man felt his grip tighten on the rifle. He had never trusted strangers, and he trusted aliens even less. The wars of the past had left scars on him. He remembered burned villages, destroyed cities, and soldiers, both human and alien, lying dead together on the ground. He knew what aliens were capable of. But these women did not look like warriors. They looked broken, beaten down by life, maybe even hunted. His dog growled beside him, and the women flinched at the sound, but none of them ran. They just stood there, waiting. He cleared his throat, his voice deep and rough. "What do you want here? Why my ranch?" The question was sharp, almost accusing. The one in front lifted her chin, rain dripping from her dark hair. "We have no tribe left. Our husbands are gone, all killed. We are widows. Our own people turned us away. They say we are useless now, weak, a burden. We have walked for days, hiding, searching, until we found this place. If you do not let us in, the storm will finish what the war started." Her words struck him. He saw the truth in her trembling lips, in the way the others hugged each other to stay standing. They were not lying. They were desperate. Another woman stepped forward, younger than the rest, her eyes wide with terror. "We beg you, human, shelter us, even for one night. We will leave at dawn if you wish." Her voice cracked, and she dropped to her knees in the mud outside his door. The others quickly followed her, kneeling in the dirt, their hands pressed together as if praying. 11 alien widows, once proud, now begging at the door of an old man who had thought his days of choices were long gone. The old soldier's heart twisted inside him. He wanted to slam the door, to shut them out, to protect the silence he had built for himself. But he could not ignore the way their shoulders shook in the cold, the way their lips turned blue from the storm. He remembered battles, yes, but he also remembered the helpless faces of civilians caught in wars. He remembered saving children, giving water to the enemy's wounded. He had not always been hard. Once he had cared. Once he had believed in protecting life. Still, caution whispered in his mind. He raised the rifle a little. "How do I know this is not a trick? Maybe you bring soldiers with you, waiting to take my land." The leader shook her head quickly, fear flashing in her glowing eyes. "No soldiers, only us. Look." She opened her cloak, showing nothing but a thin, weak body. The others did the same, revealing that they carried no weapons, only hunger and grief. "We are not a threat," she said softly. "We only ask for mercy." For a long moment, only the storm spoke, thunder rolling above them. The old man's face was hard, but inside he was fighting himself. His dog whimpered, as if sensing his struggle. Then, finally, he stepped aside. His voice was heavy, but it carried a decision. "Get inside, before the cold kills you." The widows gasped in relief, bowing their heads. One by one, they moved into the ranch, dripping water on the wooden floor. The warmth of the fire reached them, and they sighed as if they had entered heaven itself. The old man shut the door behind them, locking the storm outside. For the first time in years, his house was full of voices, soft whispers in a language he barely understood. They huddled close to the fire, holding their hands out to the flames, steam rising as their wet clothes began to dry. He stood back, still gripping his rifle, watching them carefully. They were weak, yes, but there was something else in their eyes too. Something they were not saying yet. The leader turned to him, her voice gentle. "Thank you, human. You have saved us." She bowed her head deeply, and the others followed her example. 11 alien widows, kneeling before a man who thought he had left the world behind. He muttered under his breath, almost to himself, "I didn't save you yet." But deep inside, he knew his life had changed the moment he opened that door. These women brought something with them, sorrow, secrets, and perhaps danger too. He could sense it, the way soldiers sense an ambush before it comes. Yet he also felt something he had not felt in years, the presence of others, the weight of responsibility, the chance to protect again. As the storm raged on outside, the widows sat around the fire, whispering to each other, sometimes glancing at him with strange eyes filled with both gratitude and fear. The old man poured water into cups and gave it to them, his hands rough but his actions gentle. They accepted it with trembling fingers, bowing their heads in respect. That night, his house was no longer silent. The sound of voices, the soft breaths of tired souls, filled the empty rooms. The lonely ranch had opened its doors, and with it, the retired soldier had opened his heart, though he did not yet admit it to himself. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Something larger, something dangerous, had followed these widows to his door, and soon he would find out what it was. The widows settled inside the old ranch, their wet clothes drying slowly by the fireplace. The warmth made them relax, but the old man kept his distance, his rifle always close. He watched them with sharp eyes, the way he once watched enemy soldiers across a battlefield. They spoke softly in their own language, words he could not fully understand, but sometimes they switched to broken human speech when addressing him. He gave them blankets, though they were old and torn, and some bread left from his simple dinner. They ate quietly, as if they had not eaten in days, their hands shaking as they lifted food to their mouths. The old man noticed things. He was a soldier once, and soldiers never stopped observing. These women looked weak, but there was a strength hiding under their sorrow. Their eyes scanned the room carefully, as if making sure of every corner. When they thought he was not watching, 2 of them whispered together, their voices low and urgent. Another one looked at the windows nervously, like she feared something outside. He narrowed his eyes. They were hiding something. He stepped closer, his voice firm. "If you're staying here, you tell me the truth. What are you running from?" The leader raised her head, her silver skin reflecting the firelight. For a moment she hesitated, then simply said, "We run from death." Her answer was short, but her eyes carried a shadow of something deeper, something she would not share yet. The others lowered their heads as if the words carried heavy meaning. The ranch, once silent, now breathed with unease. At night, the wind blew against the walls, but there were other sounds too. Strange lights flickered far on the horizon, like blue sparks in the sky. The old man saw them from his porch, narrowing his eyes against the storm's fading rain. They were not lightning. He had seen lights like those before, in war zones where machines patrolled the sky. His gut told him trouble was near. Inside, the widows pretended to sleep, curled up under blankets on the floor. But the man noticed that at least 2 of them kept their eyes open, watching the windows, listening to the silence outside. He wondered if they were guards or just too afraid to close their eyes. His dog paced around the house, growling softly now and then, ears raised toward the door as if it heard something the man could not. The next morning, the storm was gone, leaving the land wet and heavy with mud. The old man woke early, as always, but now his routine was different. He found the widows in the yard, moving quietly among the fences. They touched the wood as if testing it, whispering to each other in their tongue. One of them tried to help feed his animals, though she was clumsy with human tools. Another brought water from the well without being asked. It was strange to see them work, as though they wanted to repay him, but the old man still felt suspicion tighten in his chest. Later that day, while he was chopping wood, he saw the leader speaking to the younger widows. Her hands moved in sharp motions, almost like military signals. The younger ones nodded quickly, their faces serious. It was not the behavior of helpless women. It was the behavior of people preparing for something. When they noticed his eyes on them, they stopped at once and turned away. He gripped the axe tighter. His instincts screamed that danger was close. That night, as the sky darkened, the strange lights returned. This time closer, brighter, moving across the horizon like searchers looking for prey. The old man felt his heart grow heavy. He stood at the porch, rifle in his hands, the dog barking at the distance. The widows gathered behind him, their faces pale with fear. One whispered, "They are coming." Another said, "He will find us." The leader raised her hand to silence them, but her own face was hard, filled with dread. The old man turned sharply. "Who will find you?" His voice cut through their whispers. The leader lowered her head, silent for a moment, then finally said, "A warlord. He hunts us. He will not stop." Her voice shook, but her words carried truth. The old man stared at her, the pieces falling together. These widows were not simply abandoned women. They were fugitives, chased by someone powerful enough to send machines into the skies. He felt anger rise in his chest. They had come to his ranch not only for shelter, but to hide from a warlord. They had brought their enemy to his doorstep. He clenched his jaw, his rifle heavy in his hands. "You should have told me," he growled. The leader's eyes shone with tears, but also with stubbornness. "If we told you, would you have opened the door?" she asked. The question stabbed deep because he knew the answer. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the lights vanished again into the night, but the warning was clear. They were being hunted. The widows looked at him not only with fear, but with hope. Hope that he, an old human soldier, could protect them. He felt the weight of their stares pressing on his shoulders. He was only one man, tired and worn. But he had been a fighter once, and that fighter inside him was waking again. Later, as the house grew quiet, he sat alone by the fire, staring into the flames. His mind wrestled with thoughts. He could send them away, tell them to leave before trouble came. That would protect his ranch, his animals, his solitude. Yet he remembered the sight of them kneeling in the mud, begging at his door. He remembered their voices trembling with desperation. He could not drive them back into the storm of death that followed them. He had lived alone for years, but maybe life had given him this chance for a reason. He did not know yet what choice he would make, but deep inside he sensed the truth. The quiet life he had built was over. The widows had brought danger, but they had also brought meaning back into his world. For the first time in years, the old soldier felt the stir of a battle coming, and he knew he would not be able to walk away from it. The night was colder than usual, and the air carried a tension that even the animals could sense. The horses refused to settle, kicking inside their stalls, and the old dog paced back and forth, ears raised, growling at the darkness. The old man sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The alien widows stayed inside, whispering nervously, their voices rising and falling like waves. He had learned by now that they were not just helpless women searching for shelter. They were hiding from someone powerful, someone dangerous, and that danger was drawing closer every hour. When the sky lit up again with blue sparks, he knew it was not just bad weather or chance. Those lights were searching, hunting. He had seen the same lights years ago during battles, scanning the fields before machines descended with fire. His gut told him the storm outside was nothing compared to the storm about to strike his ranch. The leader of the widows finally stepped onto the porch. She stood tall, though her eyes betrayed fear. "You should know the truth," she said softly. "He is coming. The one who hunts us, the warlord." Her voice trembled when she spoke his name, as if even saying it aloud gave it power. The old man's face hardened, his jaw tightening. "Why does he want you? Why risk sending machines across the land for widows?" Her silver eyes shone in the moonlight, filled with pain. "We carry something he cannot lose, knowledge. Our husbands were generals. Before they died, they gave us secrets, maps, codes, things that can end his power. He killed them all, but he failed to kill us. If he finds us, he will erase the last witnesses. Without us, his rule will be endless." The old man turned away, staring at the dark land stretching beyond his fences. His ranch, his peace, his silence, it had all been invaded by this hidden war. He hated being pulled into battles again, but he also knew he could not ignore what she had told him. If these widows were truly carrying secrets that could end a tyrant, then they were more than victims. They were targets, and that meant his home was now a battlefield. The others stepped outside, one by one. Their faces were pale, their hands shaking, but their eyes carried determination. One of them said, "We did not choose to come here, but fate brought us to your door." Another added, "If you send us away, he will catch us by morning. If you shelter us, you risk his anger." Their voices blended with the cold night, and the old man felt the weight of their words press down on him like armor. For a long moment, he did not answer. He remembered the wars of his youth, the screams, the smoke, the endless nights of gunfire. He had left that life behind because he wanted peace. But peace had never truly stayed with him. It had been a thin veil over his scars, and now the veil was torn away. Slowly, he stood and lifted his rifle, checking its weight in his hands. His voice was steady when he spoke. "If he comes, I won't hand you over. Not to him. Not to anyone." The widows exchanged looks, surprised by his words. Some of them bowed their heads in gratitude. Others wept quietly. The leader's eyes softened. "You will stand against him, alone?" The old man shook his head. "No man truly stands alone, not when others are watching, not when others have something to lose. You came to me for help. That means, whether you like it or not, we stand together now." The night dragged on, heavy with silence and expectation. The widows rested uneasily, their bodies exhausted from travel and fear. The old man stayed awake, sitting in the corner of the room with his rifle across his lap, the firelight dancing across his weathered face. His dog lay at his feet, ears twitching at every sound outside. He did not sleep. Soldiers never sleep when they know the enemy is near. And then it happened. A distant boom echoed across the plains, followed by the grinding sound of engines. The windows shook. The ground trembled faintly. The widows bolted upright, terror filling their eyes. "He is here," one whispered. Another clutched the leader's arm, trembling. The old man's hands tightened around the rifle, his breath slow and steady. He had fought armies before. He had watched enemies march with weapons stronger than his own. But he had survived then, and he would survive now. Through the window, glowing machines appeared, moving like shadows across the land. Their lights cut through the darkness, scanning the fields, moving closer with each second. The widows huddled together, their fear almost breaking the room into pieces. The leader turned to the old man, her voice strong despite her fear. "If he captures us, he will not just kill us, he will burn your land to ash." The old man rose, his back straight despite his age. "Then we make sure he doesn't capture you." He opened the door and stepped onto the porch, the cold air rushing against his face. The machines were close now, their lights crawling across the fields like predators. He raised his rifle and whispered to himself, "One more fight." Behind him, the widows gathered, their faces pale but their eyes shining with a strange fire. Some of them had skills he had not seen yet. Quick hands, sharp eyes, the posture of those who once trained beside warriors. They were not soldiers, but they were not helpless either. The old man realized then that maybe they were not asking only for his protection. Maybe they were waiting for a leader, someone to guide them. The ground shook again as the warlord's scouts drew nearer. The widows held their breath, clutching each other. The dog barked furiously, sensing the danger. The old man stood firm on his porch, his rifle steady, his eyes unflinching. He had lived alone for years, but now the silence of his ranch was broken by the footsteps of war. The first machine appeared at the edge of his land, its metal body glinting under the moonlight, its glowing eye scanning the fields. The old man raised his rifle and whispered, "This is my home." His finger pressed the trigger. The shot rang out across the plains, louder than thunder, louder than the storm. The battle for the widows had begun, and the retired human who once believed his wars were over had stepped back into the fire without hesitation. The first shot echoed through the land, and the machine at the edge of the ranch sparked, its glowing eye shattered by the bullet. The widows gasped, some covering their mouths in shock, others gripping each other as if holding on for dear life. The old man did not wait to see the sparks die out. He pulled back the bolt of his rifle, loaded the next round, and prepared for the others that were surely close behind. His hands were steady, his breathing calm, like the soldier he once was. The ground rumbled again, louder this time, as more machines crawled toward the ranch. Their strange bodies moved on 6 legs, metal shining under the moonlight. Blue lights swept across the field, searching for heat, searching for movement. The dog barked fiercely, his growls echoing in the night. The widows crouched low inside the house, their eyes wide with terror. But the old man stood tall, as if the years of loneliness had melted away, and the warrior inside him had returned. He quickly gave orders without even thinking. Block the windows. Use the wood near the fire. Keep the light low. His voice was sharp and commanding, and to his surprise, the widows obeyed immediately. Some pushed furniture against the glass, others tore cloth to cover the flames so the glow would not give them away. They moved with surprising speed, as though they had been waiting for someone to tell them what to do. The leader stepped up to him, her face pale but determined. "You cannot fight them all alone." The old man's eyes narrowed. "I won't be alone. You will help me." She hesitated, but then nodded. She turned to the others, speaking in their tongue, and they moved quickly, gathering anything that could be used: metal pipes, tools, sharp knives from the kitchen. They had no guns, but they were ready to fight beside him. The first machine reached the fence. Its legs crushed the wooden posts as if they were nothing. Sparks flew, and the air filled with the sound of grinding metal. The old man raised his rifle again, took a slow breath, and fired. Another shot, another spark, and the machine collapsed to the ground with a hiss of smoke. But more were coming. He could see their glowing eyes in the distance, spreading across the land like fireflies of death. Inside, the widows worked fast. One of them, younger and quick, dragged barrels of water and placed them near the doors, as if she already knew fire might come. Another broke apart old furniture to create barricades. They were not soldiers, but desperation had turned them into warriors. The old man realized he was not teaching them. He was awakening something already inside them. When the second machine reached the yard, it fired a beam of blue light, burning a line across the ground. The widows screamed, but the old man shouted, "Stay down!" He aimed carefully, his finger squeezing the trigger, and the machine's head burst apart. The recoil slammed into his shoulder, but he did not falter. The house shook, dust falling from the ceiling, as if the ranch itself knew the war had returned. The widows joined the fight. One ran to the stable and released the horses, sending them galloping into the night so the machines would not kill them trapped inside. Another climbed to the upper floor with a lantern, using its light to signal where the machines were moving, guiding the old man's aim. They risked their lives, their fear swallowed by courage. The leader knelt beside him, holding the rifle's spare rounds. Each time he fired, she handed him another bullet with trembling but steady hands. Her silver eyes shone in the firelight, and she whispered, "You fight like a man who has lost everything." He did not look at her, only kept his eyes on the battlefield. "I fight like a man who won't lose again." More machines poured onto the land, crushing the earth beneath their weight. The widows attacked with what little they had. They threw burning oil at the machines, the flames licking at the metal. They struck with knives when the machines came too close, screaming with desperation. The old man moved among them, his rifle cracking in the night, his voice guiding them, his courage giving them strength. The ranch was no longer a quiet home. It was a fortress under siege, and every corner of it was alive with the chaos of battle. Sparks lit the darkness, flames rose where oil burned, and smoke filled the air. But in the middle of it all, the old man stood tall, and the widows fought at his side. They were no longer strangers to him. They were comrades. The fight raged on until the last machine fell, collapsing into the mud with a hiss of dying sparks. The widows collapsed too, gasping for breath, their bodies shaking from exhaustion. The old man lowered his rifle, sweat dripping down his weathered face, his arms trembling from the strain. For a moment, there was silence again, broken only by the sound of their heavy breathing and the crackle of burning wood. Then, far in the distance, a louder roar echoed. It was deeper, heavier, and it chilled them to the bone. The widows froze, their faces pale. The leader whispered in fear, "He is coming, the warlord himself." The old man looked at the broken machines scattered around his land. He knew this was only the beginning. The small battle had been a warning, a test. The real fight had not yet begun. He turned to the widows, their eyes filled with terror but also with hope. His voice was rough but steady. "Then we'll be ready." That night they worked together, stronger than before. The widows no longer hid their skills. One showed she knew how to repair broken metal, helping him fix the gates. Another revealed she could read signals, watching the skies for movement. The old man gave them tasks, and they obeyed without question. The ranch transformed into a camp of defenders, every person with a role, every hand preparing for war. For years, he had lived in silence, a man buried under memories. But now his home was alive with voices, movement, and purpose. The widows, once helpless in the storm, were now his allies. He had taken them in as strangers, but they were becoming something more. Partners in survival, a family forged by battle. And deep inside, he knew the real test was yet to come, when the warlord himself would step onto his land. But he was no longer afraid. He was ready to fight again. The night was heavy with silence after the battle, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of waiting, the kind that pressed against the chest and made every breath sharp. The broken machines lay scattered across the muddy ground, their glowing eyes dead, smoke rising slowly into the dark sky. The widows sat close to the fire inside, their bodies shivering, not from the cold, but from fear. They knew what the old man also knew. The small attack was only the beginning. The old man stood outside, his rifle slung across his back, scanning the land with sharp eyes. His dog stayed by his side, growling low every time the wind shifted. In the distance, faint lights flickered again, but these were bigger, brighter, moving slower, like giants approaching step by step. The ground trembled softly, carrying the promise of something massive drawing closer. He narrowed his eyes. The warlord was coming. He walked back into the house where the widows stared at him with pale faces. "It won't be long now," he said, his voice calm but heavy. "He's coming here." The leader lowered her head. "He will not stop until he has us. He will burn this place, kill every living thing, just to erase us." The younger widows began to cry, clutching each other. Fear filled the room like smoke, thick and suffocating. The old man slammed his hand on the table, the sound startling them. "Listen to me. Crying will not save you. Hiding will not save you. If you want to live, you fight." His voice was iron, sharp like the days when he commanded men in battle. For a moment, silence followed. Then slowly, one by one, the widows raised their heads. Their eyes, still wet with tears, began to harden with determination. They nodded, and the old man felt the air shift. They were no longer just survivors. They were ready to become defenders. The night stretched on as they worked together. The old man showed them how to strengthen the barricades, using old metal sheets and heavy logs. He taught them how to move silently, how to listen for the enemy in the dark, how to keep their fear from controlling their actions. Some of them had quick hands and sharp reflexes, surprising him with how fast they learned. One widow showed she could throw sharp knives with deadly accuracy. Another revealed she had once worked in war camps, knowing how to mix fire with oil to make crude explosives. The old man realized then that they had more strength than they had ever admitted. They only needed someone to lead them, someone to make them believe they could fight. When the first light of dawn broke across the sky, the ground shook with a force stronger than before. The widows rushed to the windows, eyes wide in horror. At the edge of the ranch, a massive shadow appeared, towering above the land. The warlord's machine, an armored beast of steel and fire, moved slowly, its weapons glinting in the rising sun. Behind it marched smaller machines, dozens of them, crawling forward like a wave of death. The widows gasped, their courage trembling under the sight. "We cannot face this," one whispered. The old man stepped forward, his rifle in his hands. "We can, and we will. Not because we are stronger, but because we have no choice." His voice was steady, and the fire in his eyes burned brighter than the machine's lights. The attack began. The warlord's army moved like thunder, crushing the earth beneath their weight. Beams of blue fire shot from the giant machine, striking the fences, setting them ablaze. The widows screamed but did not run. They grabbed their weapons, their knives, their fire-filled jars, and followed the old man's orders. The ranch became alive with battle once more. The old man fired his rifle with deadly precision, dropping machines one after another. The widows hurled fire into the advancing army, the flames wrapping around metal legs, slowing them down. One widow climbed the rooftop, signaling where the largest threats were, guiding the old man's aim. Another fought beside the stable, stabbing at any machine that got too close. The The giant machine of the warlord moved closer, its weapons tearing through the land. With every step, the ground trembled as though the earth itself feared him. Then, for the first time, they saw him, standing tall inside the armored beast, his figure glowing with cruel power. His voice boomed across the field, carried by speakers. "Hand them over, human! They are mine. Stand aside, and I will spare your life." The old man's jaw tightened. He shouted back, his voice echoing like thunder. "This is my land. You'll take nothing from me." His words carried across the field, and even the widows, trembling with fear, felt their hearts pound with courage. The warlord laughed, a sound deep and mocking, and then ordered his machines forward. The final defense began. The widows fought with everything they had. They set traps in the mud, causing smaller machines to fall and break. They swung hammers, knives, anything sharp, their voices screaming with rage and defiance. The old man moved among them like a shadow of his younger self, fast and ruthless, every shot from his rifle true and deadly. The warlord's machine reached the heart of the ranch, towering over the house. The widows fell back, terrified, but the old man did not move. He stood firm, his rifle in his hands, staring up at the monster. The warlord looked down at him with glowing eyes. "One man against me?" he mocked. The old man raised his rifle slowly, his voice calm. "Not one man, 12 souls, together." At that moment, the widows stepped forward, gathering around him, their fear replaced by burning determination. They were ready to die beside him, to protect the last hope they carried. The air was filled with fire, smoke, and screams, but none of them stepped back. They fought as one, the retired human and the 11 alien widows, standing together against the warlord's fury. And though the land shook and the sky burned, none of them gave up. For the first time in years, the old man felt alive, not as a soldier, not as a recluse, but as a leader with something worth protecting. The final clash had begun, and the fate of the ranch, the widows, and the man who had once chosen loneliness was about to be decided in blood and fire. The battle reached its peak as the warlord's great machine towered over the ranch, fire spitting from its weapons and shaking the earth beneath every step. The widows fought with everything inside them, their fear replaced with desperate courage. The old man stood at the front, his rifle hot from constant firing, his body aching, but his eyes burning with determination. He knew this was the fight of his life, and maybe the last fight he would ever see. The widows screamed in defiance as they attacked with fire, knives, and broken tools. They were no longer just survivors of war. They were warriors now, forged in the heat of desperation. They moved with unity, trusting the old man's commands. Every time he shouted an order, they followed without hesitation. He told them where to throw fire, where to hide, where to strike. And slowly, piece by piece, the army of machines began to crumble. But the warlord himself was different. His voice roared from inside the armored giant, mocking them, calling them weak. "You cannot win, human. They belong to me, and you are nothing but dust from a forgotten war." His words shook the widows, but the old man stood firm. He shouted back, his voice stronger than the thunder. "They are not yours. They are free. And as long as I stand, you will not take them." The warlord grew angry. His machine fired a beam of blazing energy that tore through the ground, destroying the stable and setting fire to part of the house. The widows cried out as smoke filled the air. The old man coughed, but he did not step back. He aimed his rifle at the glowing joints of the massive machine and fired. The bullet struck true, and sparks burst out. The monster shuddered but did not fall. It was too strong, too armored. The widows realized they could not win by fighting like this forever. One of them shouted, "We must bring him down from inside." The old man looked at them, his mind racing. She was right. The machine was too powerful to destroy from the outside. The only way was to climb it, to break into its heart and face the warlord directly. Without hesitation, he gave the order. "Cover me." The widows obeyed at once, throwing fire and stones at the advancing machines, distracting them while the old man ran through the smoke and flames. His dog charged with him, barking furiously, weaving between metal legs. The old man reached the giant's side, his hands gripping the hot, smoking metal. He climbed, his muscles straining, his breath ragged, but his determination unbroken. The warlord saw him and laughed, shaking the machine to throw him off. "Foolish human! You think you can reach me?" But the old man held on with the grip of someone who had survived too many battles to give up now. Slowly, painfully, he climbed higher, his hands cut and burned until he reached a hatch near the machine's chest. With a grunt, he pulled out his knife and slammed it into the lock. Sparks flew, the metal screeched, and finally, the hatch burst open. Inside, the warlord stood, towering and armored, his alien body massive and cruel. His eyes glowed with hatred as he turned to face the old man. "You should have died years ago," he snarled. The old man stepped inside, his knife in one hand, his rifle strapped across his back. His voice was calm, steady, and unshaken. "Maybe, but not tonight." The fight inside the machine was brutal. The warlord swung with fists like hammers, smashing walls, shaking the cabin. The old man dodged, struck with his knife, fired close shots with his pistol. The machine staggered outside, its movements unsteady as the battle raged within. The widows watched from below, their hearts racing, praying silently for their protector. The old man's body screamed with pain. Every strike from the warlord felt like it could break his bones, but he refused to stop. He remembered the widows kneeling at his door, begging for shelter. He remembered their tears, their hope, their trust in him, and he knew he could not let them down. With a final roar, he drove the knife deep into the warlord's chest, twisting with all his strength. The alien screamed, his body convulsing, sparks bursting from the controls around him. The giant machine shook violently, flames bursting from its joints. The old man grabbed onto the railing as the warlord collapsed, his glowing eyes fading into darkness. The monster fell backward, crashing into the earth with a thunderous boom that shook the entire ranch. Dust, fire, and smoke filled the air as silence followed the destruction. The widows ran forward, calling out, their voices filled with panic and hope. From the wreckage, the old man emerged, limping, his body covered in ash and blood, but alive. His dog barked joyfully, running to his side. The widows rushed to him, tears streaming down their faces. They surrounded him, touching his arms, his shoulders, making sure he was real, making sure he was still breathing. He looked at them, his tired eyes softening. "It's over," he whispered. "You're safe now." The widows fell to their knees around him, not in fear but in respect. They bowed their heads, whispering words of gratitude in their language, their voices breaking with emotion. For them, he was no longer just a human farmer, no longer just a retired soldier. He was their protector, their savior, their family. In the days that followed, the ranch was rebuilt. The widows stayed, helping with the work, their hands busy with tasks that gave them purpose again. The house, once empty and silent, was now full of voices, laughter, and life. The old man, who had lived alone for so many years, found himself surrounded by people who needed him, who looked at him with trust and affection. He had given them shelter, but they had given him something greater, a reason to live again. One evening, as the sun set over the wide fields, the old man sat on the porch, his dog at his feet, the widows working nearby. He looked out at the horizon, the land quiet at last. His voice was soft, almost to himself. "I thought my life was over. I thought loneliness was all I had left. But now," he looked at the 11 widows, their faces glowing in the golden light. "Now I'll never be alone again." And with that, the man who had once lived in silence finally found peace. Not in solitude, but in the family he had never expected, a family he had fought to protect with everything he had left.